No point in arguing. Um, but not for the usual reasons, at least those reasons which could easily be used, common reasons that are usually cited to support a position like that. I'm going to first say arguing is better or more effective than um, people often think. So the first half is yay for arguing, and then the second half is boo for arguing in some circumstances. In those circumstances, I'm going to suggest that arguing is pointless and we need to do other things. I'm talking about, by arguing, I simply mean the exchange of reasons, giving evidence to people in order to change their minds, which may be in a formal argumentative context, but can consist in writing an article, talking on TV at a local town hall, having a chat with somebody, in the line for coffee. Obviously, argument is central to democracy. Democracy has many justifications, but one of them is an epistemic justification. It aggregates information. It's important to us that we choose representatives who are going to uh, advance our interests. And in order for us to do that, we've got to know um, what our interests are, what policies would advance them, and who um, would get behind those policies. All of those are factual questions. All of those are things we can be mistaken about. And all of which we can only learn about through the exchange of reasons. That's an idealized picture of democratic debate, but you don't need me to tell you that this idealized picture is one from which we fall very short now more than ever, it seems. It looks like there's no point in arguing because people live in separate realities. They believe what they want to believe, they're impervious to evidence. And I could point to a range of recent events as an illustration of that, which I won't do because they're very salient to you right now. Anyway, I want to suggest, let me just mention Swift. You often hear this in some sort of modernized form. You can't argue somebody out of a position into which they didn't argue themselves in the first place. Swift's original was reasoning will never make a man correct an ill opinion, which by reasoning he never acquired. That's clearly false as it stands, or at least it seems extremely odd. It seems about as why would you think that because you didn't acquire a view by arguing that you can't be moved from it by arguing? And I mean, would you think that if you didn't travel somewhere by train, you can't leave there by train? It just seems like a kind of mistake. Um, and it better not be true because we don't generally get our initial opinions by argument. We get them by some sort of osmosis or by testimony. And it seems like these things are amenable to argument. What people must be getting at when they say things like, you can't reason with people out of beliefs they didn't acquire through reason, they must mean those beliefs are not reasons responsive. And that generally is just not true. The standard argument in psychology about why people believe the things they do does cite a lack of responsiveness to evidence. It's true. So you might think of the heuristics and biases program associated with Kahneman and Tversky, or you might think of motivated cognition, if that's a different thing to the heuristics and biases program. Um, all of these are psychological programs which aim to show that belief update, belief fixation is importantly not subject to evidence, but rather to motivations of various kinds. If that picture's true, then argument has relatively little grip on some of our most salient political beliefs in particular. Those are the ones people think are most likely to be swayed by motivation. In fact, the evidence for the power of cognitive biases is surprisingly weak. Almost all, I'm yet to come across a really powerful demonstration of motivated reasoning, which isn't amenable to a Bayesian explanation. That is, which explains belief update in terms of people's prior beliefs. So a lot of experiments show that there's a partisan difference between how people update on evidence, but that's exactly what you should expect because partisanship correlates with or is constituted by different patterns of trust in different sources. Given those different background beliefs, people are disposed to identify different problems with arguments. They place trust in different sources, and their polarization on evidence is just perfectly Bayesian rational. My claim here is by no means novel. Kevin Dorst has made it, in philosophy with formal modeling. In psychology, Ben Tappan and his research group, which has included some philosophers, including Stephen Gadsby at various times, have been making this argument that psychological research rarely even attempts to control for background beliefs. And given it doesn't attempt to control for background beliefs, its evidence is that we're subject to motivated cognition is open to other interpretations. Alexander Kopok, in his recent book, Psychologist, Persuasion in Parallel, thinks that this debate is actually intractable. Everything motivated cognition can explain, Bayesian models can explain, and vice versa. And there's just no way currently to tease these things apart. I'll skip over that. Basically, I've already said that. So this is just, this is yay for the power of argument. That's the yay part of the talk. We've got every reason to think that people do respond to evidence. And Kopok himself shows, so on a Bayesian picture, you should expect people to be highly resistant to evidence, given that they have low trust in the sources or they have lower prior probabilities in the evidence being true. But Kopok himself says they should be responsive to evidence, nevertheless, to some degree. And if you simply have enough power, experimental power, he shows, that's exactly what you see. So even committed partisans do update on evidence in the direction you hope they do. It's just that they do it to a very small extent. So to show that they're updating, you've got to have large numbers of subjects. Very few experiments, studies like that. Kopok is the only person I know who's done these kind of 18,000 participant studies. Participant numbers are much bigger in psychology thanks to online data collection, but typically they're much smaller than that. So that's the good news. There's an obvious objection, though, and that takes us to the bad news. The obvious objection is while Bayesian models can explain partisan beliefs about taxation, about the direction the country should be going in, about who's trustworthy, Even lots of factual beliefs about, for example, I think climate change, which is one I'll mention later. It's hard to see how you give a Bayesian rational explanation of some things that people appear to believe. For example, that the COVID vaccine contains microchips to control us, or that the Democratic Party is controlled by pedophilic Satanists. This is a belief, the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, which has been reported to be believed by 40 million Americans at one point, or that literal lizard people control the world. That one is reported to be believed by 12 million Americans, that shape-shifting reptilians control the most important institutions. It's hard to see how people could have Bayesian priors which rationalize beliefs like that. Why do people report believing things like that? Well, for a variety of reasons, but I think very commonly, not in all cases, but very commonly when they report believing these bizarre things, they simply are not reporting beliefs at all. They are either insincere or they are mistaken about what they believe. So here's some evidence for insincerity first. So one route to insincere reporting of belief is what's called expressive responding. Expressive responding is what it sounds like when you respond to express an attitude. This is non-cognitivism. If you remember your meta-ethics 101, it's non-cognitivism transferred to the psychology sphere. People like Hare said, murder is wrong means basically boo murder. Actually, I think Stevenson's view is closer to that. When people report believing some political claims, what they are really mean is yay my side or boo the other side. A lot of the evidence for expressive responding is open to other interpretations, but I think this study by Schaffner and Lukes is compelling evidence. So just after the first Trump inauguration, his then press secretary, Sean Spicer, said it was the biggest such event in history that sparked a little controversy over that claim. It was clearly untrue. It was that claim that led to Kellyanne Conway saying that Spicer was reporting the alternative facts, if you remember that. Schaffner and Lukes, Brian Schaffner and Samantha Lukes, took advantage of that controversy and ran this experiment or study, really a study, not an experiment, within days of that hitting the headlines. They simply showed, in this condition, they simply showed their participants unlabeled photos of the Trump inauguration on the left, first Trump inauguration, and the first Obama inauguration on the right, unlabeled, and asked which photo has more people. That's all. Not a question about Trump and Obama, not about the inaugurations. Which photo has more people? A minority, a significant minority of Trump supporters chose the picture on the left. No, these were Trump voters, people who reported voting for Trump. No Clinton, or at least very few Clinton voters, chose the photo with Trump voters.
Neil, you just cut out for about 10 seconds.
I'm
If you could.
I'm
Sorry
sorry
about that.
I'll just quickly, a significant minority of Trump voters, but not Clinton voters or independents, chose the picture on the left. They chose the picture on the left as having more people. It's clearly not true, and it's wildly implausible that they're reporting a belief, that they looked at that picture and said, yes, that has more people in it than the photo on the right. Very clearly, they were choosing the photo to express their support for Trump rather than to report a belief. This study, Rob Russ and I, Rob Russ, my postdoc in Australia, and I replicated this study, as you'd expect, given quite a few years have passed. The effect size is smaller, but it still replicates. Trump voters are still apt to pick that photo as depicting a larger crowd. Clearly, they're not reporting a belief. That's one route to reporting insincerely. Here's a second route, sheer trolling. Reporting a belief for the fun of it or deliberately to corrupt research. For the lulz. Another Trump era phenomenon, you might remember Trump made some typically ill-judged remarks about bleach and coronavirus. In the wake of those remarks, it was widely reported that Trump supporters were drinking or even injecting bleach to treat or prevent COVID. CDC did a small study, and they found 4% of Americans reported drinking cleaning products to combat COVID. That's 12 million Americans, if their representative sample was indeed representative. 12 million Americans were ingesting bleach and other household cleaners. Widely reported at the time. Is it true? Littman and colleagues did a replication with a bigger sample, and they did replicate it. 4% reported ingesting bleach, another 4% ingesting other cleaning products. But as well as replicating it, they put in sincerity checks. Attention checks are common in psychology, just little catch questions to make sure that people are paying attention. You discard the data of those people who don't appear to be paying attention. But sincerity checks are very unusual. They put in questions like, have you ever died from a heart attack? Can you name every US senator ever from memory? Have you never used the internet? This was an online survey, by the way. Do you know what the word whatlet means? They made up the word. All but 11 of the people who reported ingesting cleaning products to combat COVID, all but 11 of them failed these sincerity checks. Of these 11, 10 of them turned out on follow-up to have either accidentally clicked yes to the question, I drank cleaning products, or on follow-up reported they had drunk cleaning products, but by mistake, they'd mistaken it for something else. It left exactly one person who passed all the sincerity checks and claimed he or she had really had ingested cleaning products. That one person, though, reported their weight as 1,900 pounds in the demographics and their height as 100. 100 what? Just 100. To a first approximation, no one was ingesting cleaning products. It was entirely the product of trolling. I'm going to skip over that. We did some, Rob and I and other colleagues, we did a study in Australia, over 1,000 participants, looking at support for conspiracy theories. This first one, the idea that man-made global warming is a hoax, is one on which there's quite a bit of pre-existing research. We took the wording from that pre-existing research, both Australian and multi-country research. We used a 5G conspiracy theory. A coronavirus is a myth. conspiracy, QAnon, transported to Australia. And the Canadian Armed Forces have been secretly developing an army of genetically engineered super intelligent giant raccoons to invade nearby countries. You may not have encountered that conspiracy theory before, and the reason is we made it up. We made it up deliberately to be completely implausible. We think it's far more likely that those people who report believing that are being insincere than that they could read that and think, yep, that sounds likely to me. There were other conspiracy theories, by the way. I'm just giving you a sample of them. Here's our results. Endorsing raccoons, that raccoons conspiracy theory, was a strong predictor of endorsing other conspiracy theories. So people who endorsed the raccoons endorsed more than 4 of our 6 other conspiracy theories. Of those who rejected it, on average, endorsed less than 1. It's also worth noting that of those who endorsed raccoons, more than half endorsed both the conspiracy theory that 5G spreads coronavirus and the conspiracy theory that coronavirus is a myth. These are clearly contradictory conspiracy theories. We think this is strong evidence that reports of conspiracy theory are heavily inflated by insincere response. For non-bizarre conspiracy theories, like that global warming conspiracy theories, controlling for insincerity reduces the number of reports from 19 to 14% in our sample. For bizarre theories, like 5G spreads coronavirus, controlling for insincerity reduces it to near 0. All the responses are being produced, or pretty much all, by insincere response. The final route to reporting beliefs that people don't really hold is mistaking fantasies for beliefs. Belief attribution is at least partially inferential. Beliefs are not luminous, to adapt Williamson's vocabulary. They're not transparent to us. We can't just look and see what we believe. As Ian Forster said, how can I tell what I think until I see what I say? And there's experimental evidence, especially the evidence on choice blindness experiments, which I won't go into, that people can be led to misattribute their own beliefs. I think cognitive dissonance literature would show that as well. Conspiracy theories, though, make the subject of absorbing fantasies. Plotting, as I say, make for good plots. We know that conspiracy theories are very entertaining because they so often feature in entertainments. Think of, the X-Files, the Americans, the Manchurian Candidate, a huge number of police procedurals which have the police in on some sort of conspiracy. And they're satisfying for obvious reasons. They pit plucky underdog against major forces. They position the person on the side of the person able to decode the conspiracy, to see through the lie. They're satisfying. They involve solving puzzles. So it's not surprising that there's just so many conspiratorial themed entertainments, and all, including some that passed themselves off, like Ancient Aliens, which was Netflix's top program in 2023, I think. Claimed to be history. The History Channel's top program in 2023 claims to be history. It's clearly conspiratorial fantasy about archaeologists covering up the evidence that aliens built the pyramids. I think there's good evidence that people have mistaken some of their fantasies for beliefs. they're not beliefs. You could mistake a fantasy for a belief and come to believe it. But when you think about the kinds of evidence people cite for conspiracy theories, it's clear they're not truly in the belief game. Here's one example I like. There's a conspiracy theory that Tom Hanks killed a minor actor who had accused him of pedophilia. A minor actor really had accused him of pedophilia. He'd accused pretty much everybody in Hollywood of pedophilia. Here's the evidence that Tom Hanks killed this actor. This actor was found dead. Police said it was a suicide, but you're not going to believe that, are you? The evidence is Tom Hanks posted this picture on Facebook. I haven't checked. Apparently he did. It's very hard to interpret this photo. He wrote, "Historic Route 66, roadkill? I hope not. Hanks, how is this a confession to murder? Well, he said roadkill. Roadkill could be a threat, right? You're a roadkill." And here's the clincher. He posted this 42 days before the minor actor died, and that actor was 42 years old at the time of his death. You can't tell me that's a coincidence. It's clear this isn't evidence at all. It's clear it's a game. People who are citing this as evidence for their beliefs are just not in the belief game at all. And this is hardly an isolated phenomenon. Think about Nick Adams, Trump's ambassador designate to Malaysia. So it's apparently a sincere believer, saying that Delta Omicron is an anagram for media control. Wake up, America. Clearly, when you're citing anagrams or pictures from Captain America, as this was widely pictured, of Corona beer and a picture of spaghetti, which looks a little bit like an electron microscope magnification of the COVID virus, or Ovid is Latin for sheep, and C is the means C in ancient languages, as evidence that COVID is planned. If you're citing this sort of thing as evidence, you're clearly not in the belief game at all. But some of the people who bought into this stuff report later, when they say, "Oh my God, how could I have believed that?" They report later that they were sincere. I think the best explanation is they were mistaking this fantasy for a belief. Okay, so I've given you 3 different routes for reporting of beliefs, which lead to people reporting beliefs that they don't in fact hold, either because they're insincere, as in expressive responding or trolling, or because they're making a mistake about what they believe. When it comes to claims like this, I think arguing is just the wrong tool. If anything, I think it tends to distract from the real basis of what's going on. If you're talking to trolls, arguing is exactly what they want. I've seen recently on social media people noticing Tim Gill. Again, Tim Gill, for those who don't know, is a sociologist who whole stick on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter anymore because Musk. But his whole shtick on Twitter, he's apparently still there, is posting productivity tips for academics. Things like, if you're spending more than 1 hour a week with your family, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? You could be using that time you're playing with your kids to write another paper. He's doing it to troll. And he's doing it as a joke. He's a prankster. He wants people to take him seriously and get angry. That's his whole thing. You've walked into his trap when you do that. When you walk into the troll's trap, you're only giving them what they want. It's not so obvious with regard to those who've mistaken their beliefs, their fantasies for beliefs, and those who engaged in expressive responding. But again, I think you risk reinforcing them. When you argue against someone who's mistaken a fantasy for a belief, you direct them towards what they take to be evidence. I think what we should be doing is directing them instead to their own mental states. We're saying, you don't really believe that, do you? Would you really act consistently with it? How much are you willing to bet? I think it's a much more effective response. When it comes to things like flat Earth or bizarre conspiracy theories, I think you're doing much better not to engage, or if you're engaging, not to engage on evidential grounds. In these sorts of circumstances, I think there is no point in arguing. Okay, thank you. I'll leave it there.
Sorry, I have to stop recording.